Other people are able to, over the course of their year, work in several different areas and make contributions across. My old friend and colleague Bill Gamson has that quality to his work. There are people who have published more than Bill, but if you look over the corpus, hardly anybody who has worked both methodologically and conceptually across as many different genres.
Mm-hmm.
That's just very striking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Let's talk about organizations a little bit,
Okay.
because you're certainly a national expert on that subject. And so my kind of philosophical questions about the social sciences, I could put them in terms of theory of organization, social science study of organization. Is it your approach that, in the end, it ought to be possible to write the definitive textbook, which is the theory of organization, or would the ideal representation be more like a set of case studies, which are insurance organizations, hospitals, universities? In other words, how much generalizing would you want to do in the theory of organization?
Well, it's very clear that case studies is not where the field are going. They may come back. There's always, as you know from Andy Abbott, his notion of a kind of continuing fractal return, return of the repressed. Each generation thinks they're discovering something new, but in fact they're breaking off or recombining elements from previous plus advances in neighboring disciplines and so on. And so the idea of end agreement on all of this, and most of the research, if you look at what's going on in research in organizations, there is a stronger qualitative component now than there was a few years ago. But if you take a look at the major journals, they're usually comparative cross-organizational statistical. The decline of the now that doesn't mean that there's not a level of generalization across organizations, but the boundaries are often not well specified, and that's again where you come back to the problem of historical context. We've only had, you have organizations like the Catholic Church that go 2,000 years back. But aside from that, if you think about corporation as a form, that's less than 200 years old. And certainly, and especially the business corporation as a form. There are private corporations or publicly formed corporations. Originally were formed for the public good, and then the business became the dominant form later out of that. So in the literature on organizations, while there's some people who still do historical work there, for instance, boy, oh boy, if you took Administrative Science Quarterly and the leading organizations journals, they're even more focused on contemporaneous things than most of sociology is. They're collecting data now, or if they're lucky, in some cases there might be a data series that they could get and do some work with, but they'll almost always be based upon government statistics, and then you have to ask how far do those go back, and and that that's usually under 200 years, and don't take into account the variation, civilizational variation, even concurrently. Friends of mine who study Chinese organizations and corporations say that Max Weber on China was much closer to being right than any modern organizational theorists, because they managed to string together small organizations into big chains based upon the combination of the state on the one hand being engaged, and on the other hand networks being engaged. So then in some cases it's almost like relational contracting. It's not the Western rationalized juridical contract that we think of as we start to think of as a universal form, and it's not necessarily a universal form.
So would you say that one important piece of organizational theory is typology? That it's discovery of different ways that organizations can be strung together or assembled?
Yeah, that could be, but it's only a very few people who are really doing it. As I see modern organizational sociology, and one of the things that's happened is study of organizations has, partly because of changes in the theories of organizations, they deserted me. They went more macro. So both pop ecology and neo-institutional theories, which are have been the dominating new theories in sociology for the last 20 years, the organization is a receptacle for influences from the institutional environment or the aggregate organizational environment, and there's nothing left inside. Now that's not true when you get over into the B school, although these perspectives have influenced the B school as well. And now here's a case of a little fractal process going on, because in fact I have seen my own particular approach to organizational theory, which was the political economy approach, which didn't have a lot of take, incidentally. It never gained the widespread use that I thought it deserved, but everybody thinks their own work is more important than anybody else's. So it never really caught that widely. It caught more in public administration. But you see some calls now for return to a more organizationally based internal life of the organization, reading the environment, than we've had recently. And they will sometimes, because I've been around for 40 years, start saying Zald's work, the YMCA book is treated as a kind of classic by a lot of people. And they will reference the YMCA book as, where they should try and connect to the new institutionalism. But that's my dream, that's my fantasy, not necessarily reality. I do see few key people doing that, but whether it amount to anything, I have no idea.